The table wasn't even properly set when my cousin's wife walked me over to it, one hand barely touching my elbow, like she was handling something she'd rather not. It was shoved against the coat rack in the far corner of the private dining room, next to the spot where servers kept their drink trays and order pads, and the only way anyone ends up sitting there is if someone specifically meant for them to. "Here you go," she said brightly, gesturing at the two empty chairs like she was revealing something pleasant. We had a bit of a last-minute seating shuffle. You understand? I understood perfectly. My cousin Nathan was standing 30 feet away with a glass of Riesling, and a laugh that carried across the whole room, already holding court beside the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. He'd chosen this venue himself, the Lakeview Private Dining Room at the Harborfront Club in Toronto, not exactly the kind of place you stumble into for a casual family dinner. For my grandparents' 50th anniversary, he'd insisted on organizing everything, and he'd been reminding everyone about it since March. He'd brought it up at Easter, at my aunt's birthday, at a completely unrelated family text thread, about whether anyone had a good plumber. What he hadn't counted on was who my plus one was, or what was about to happen before dessert. My name is Bia. I'm 31 years old, and I teach grade 4 at a public school in the east end of the city. I drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic that I have never once been embarrassed about. I keep a small apartment that I genuinely love, and I have never, not once in my adult life, felt the need to announce my mortgage amount at a family dinner. This apparently makes me a disappointment to a specific subset of my relatives. Nathan is my first cousin on my mother's side. He's 4 years older than me and has been the family's appointed golden child for as long as I can remember. The one whose achievements were taped to the fridge, whose career updates circulated through the family group chat with accompanying exclamation points, whose wedding my grandmother flew to Banff to attend, despite her bad knee and her very clear preference for staying home. He runs a real estate development firm, Nathan Aldridge Developments, which sounds considerably more impressive than the reality. A 6-person office in North York and a portfolio of half-finished condo projects strung along the 401 corridor between Mississauga and Oshawa. He drives a leased Porsche Cayenne. His wife, who I'll call by her name, Tiffany, posts about their lifestyle on Instagram to 40-something thousand followers, who don't know that the vacation photos are sponsored stays. The designer bags are rented through a subscription service, and the lake house they reference in July is a timeshare they split with 3 other couples. I know all of this because my grandmother told me. My grandmother notices everything, and says most of it eventually if you're patient. When we were kids, Nathan was fine, normal. We fought over the television remote at Christmas and traded Halloween candy and sat in the same back seat on long drives to the cottage without anyone's life being ruined by it. It was only in the last 5 or 6 years, once the firm got some traction and he married Tiffany, that the condescension became a permanent feature of his personality. At every family gathering, there was a comment about teacher salaries, a question, always phrased as interest, about whether I was still at the same school, said the way you might ask someone if they were still using dial-up internet. A look exchanged between him and Tiffany that I was clearly intended to catch. He'd once told my aunt, within my earshot, that I was comfortable with small ambitions, with the delivery of someone who believed this to be an insightful observation rather than a cheap shot. I had let it go. Every time I let it go. Not because I was a pushover, but because I genuinely did not need his approval, and there is a quiet kind of confidence in that I think bothered him more than any argument I could have started. When my grandparents announced they wanted to celebrate 50 years of marriage with a proper family dinner, Nathan immediately stepped forward to organize it. No one argued because arguing with Nathan about something he'd already decided to do was a particular kind of exhausting, and because he did, to his credit, have the connections to pull together something nice. What he organized was a statement, $120 a head. Private dining event that looked, from the outside, like a gesture of love and functioned, on closer inspection, as his personal portfolio piece. He'd even had the venue print a menu card with Nathan Aldridge Developments proudly presents at the top, which I'm fairly certain my grandmother had stared at for a long moment before deciding not to say anything about it. 2 weeks before the event, I called Tiffany to confirm I'd be bringing a +1. I'd been seeing someone for a few months, a quiet, steady man I'd met at a fundraiser for a community land trust in February. Not flashy. He didn't talk about his work unless directly asked, and even then he kept it brief. I liked that about him. Tiffany had said fine, of course, not a problem, they'd add a seat. They had not added a seat. What they had done instead, as best as I can reconstruct it, was wait until the night arrived and quietly ensure the seating chart had no room for me at any of the proper round tables. When the host guided me through the dining room, past tables where my aunts and uncles sat with full place settings, past my grandparents' table of honor with the white roses and the framed photos from their wedding, I thought, for a moment, there'd been some kind of mistake. There had not been a mistake. The host stopped at the corner where the coat rack jutted out at an angle, and a folding table had been covered with a tablecloth that was slightly too small and didn't reach the floor properly. There was a small tent card with my name written in pen, not printed. Next to it, the server station hummed with quiet mechanical indifference. Tiffany appeared at my shoulder almost immediately, with the warm smile she deployed in situations where she needed her warmth to function as armor. "We're so sorry about the mix-up," she said, sounding not particularly sorry. "It was a last-minute count issue. You know how these things happen." I sat down. I smoothed the skirt of my burgundy dress, which I had bought specifically for tonight, and felt, in that moment, absurdly overdressed for my location. The server gave me a look of undisguised sympathy and escaped quickly. I ordered a sparkling water. I told myself to breathe. I was good at being invisible. I'd had practice. From across the room, Nathan tapped the side of his wine glass. The room settled into quiet. He had that easy, projected confidence in front of a room that some people are just born with, and he used it well. "Before we get into the first course," he said warmly, including everyone, "I want to take a moment." He smiled at my grandparents, let the moment sit, and then let his eyes travel the room until they found me in the corner. His smile didn't shift. If anything, it deepened slightly. "We've all made our way here tonight to celebrate something real and lasting. Family." A small, comfortable pause. "And wherever we end up sitting, even if that's beside the coat rack." Light laughter moved through the room like a ripple. "I think we can all agree the important thing is that we're here together." He raised his glass to 50 years. I kept my expression neutral. I did not look at the tablecloth. I did not look at my hands. I looked across the room at my cousin, and I held his gaze, calm and steady, because that was the one thing he couldn't take from me. My aunt, 3 tables away, had gone rigid. I caught her eye briefly. She looked furious and helpless in equal measure. I looked back at my water glass and waited. The dining room doors opened about 20 minutes later, just as the appetizers were arriving. I heard them before I saw him. Not a dramatic entrance, just the quiet shift of attention that happens in a room when someone's presence lands differently than the ambient noise. He crossed the dining room in a dark charcoal suit. No tie, unhurried. He didn't scan the room the way someone self-conscious does. He just moved through it and found me in the corner and came straight over. "Sorry I'm late," he said, pulling out the empty chair beside me. The gardener was completely stopped. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said. "I'm really glad you're here." He sat down and took in our situation with one brief, sweeping look. The coat rack at elbow distance. The server station 2 feet behind us, the tablecloth that didn't quite reach the floor. He said nothing about it. He picked up the menu and asked me what I'd heard was good. And then the room changed. Not loudly. It was the opposite of loud. A specific localized silence, the kind you notice the way you notice when a sound you'd stopped registering suddenly stops. I looked up and Nathan was standing very still across the dining room. His wine glass arrested halfway to his mouth. All the practiced ease completely gone from his face. What was underneath it looked like the moment before bad news arrives. My date had glanced up, registered Nathan's expression across the room, and given a small professional nod. Nothing warm, nothing cold. The nod you give someone you know in a context where warmth isn't the relevant register. Nathan put his wine glass down hard enough that it sloshed onto the tablecloth. He said something to Tiffany. She touched his arm. He walked away from her hand. His name is Edmund. Edmund Kwan. He's 43 years old, and he is the vice president of commercial real estate lending at TD Bank's Bay Street division. He approves, or declines, to construction financing that keeps development companies like my cousins operational. He oversees a lending portfolio that runs into hundreds of millions of dollars across the Greater Toronto area. In the specific, pressurized world my cousin inhabited professionally, Edmund Kwan was not a person you arranged carelessly. He was a person whose assistant's assistant you were careful to be pleasant to. Nathan had been reading Edmund's signature on his loan agreements for the better part of 3 years. He crossed the dining room faster than I'd ever seen him move. He arrived at our table slightly breathless, with a smile that had been assembled in such a hurry. It wasn't quite aligned. "Mr. Kwan," he said, this is a surprise. I had absolutely no idea you'd be here this evening." My date set down the menu. "Nathan," he said evenly, "good to see you." "Of course, yes. Can I move you? There's been some confusion with the seating. Clearly you should be at the main table. We have room. Let me just speak to the—" "That's all right," Edmund said. "I'm fine here." Nathan looked at me then. It was a different look than the one from the microphone. No performance in it, just something shifting and recalculating behind his eyes. "Bae, I didn't realize you two were, I had no idea." "We met at a fundraiser," I said, "in February, for the land trust on Gerrard." Tiffany arrived then, her heels precise against the hardwood. She came to stand beside Nathan with her photograph smile activated, looked at Edmund, looked at me, looked at Edmund again. The smile stayed in place. Everything behind it went somewhere very quiet. "Tiffany," Nathan said in a voice I had genuinely never heard him use, stripped down, no texture to it at all. "Go back to the table." She went. Nathan stood there another moment, trying to find an angle. "Mr. Kwan, I really do think we could get you a better—" "Nathan." Edmund looked up fully for the first time in the conversation, and his voice was measured and unhurried and left absolutely no room. "I'm here as B's guest. I'd like to enjoy the dinner." He let one beat pass. "We should find time this week to talk properly, though. My team had a look at the updated pro forma your office submitted for the Mississauga project on Thursday." My cousin's face did something complicated. The flush of social embarrassment drained, and was replaced by something much less comfortable. "Page 12 is going to need a thorough conversation," Edmund continued, in the same even tone he might use to discuss the weather. "Your team's projected absorption rate is sitting about 30% above anything the comparable market data will support. That's before we get to the construction cost estimates, which our risk department flagged." He paused. "Flagged quite specifically." At the next table over, my aunt had gone completely still. A second cousin had angled his chair very slightly toward us. The nearby conversation had stalled in a way people were not acknowledging. "Those numbers are solid," Nathan said, and his voice didn't hold. "Our consultants—" "Monday," Edmund said. "My assistant will send a time." He picked up his fork. "Enjoy your evening." Nathan stood there for a moment that lasted longer than any moment has a right to. Then he walked back across the dining room to his table, and the ambient noise of the room gradually resumed. I let out a slow breath. Edmund glanced at me. "Was that all right?" he asked. "More than all right," I said. He nodded and turned his attention to the appetizer the server had just set down. "Tell me about your grandparents," he said. "What's the story? 50 years is something." We stayed at that table for the rest of dinner. Twice, servers offered, with visible discomfort, to find us proper seats at another table. Twice, Edmund thanked them pleasantly and said we were fine exactly where we were. The coat rack was, he observed at one point, a very efficient use of space. I laughed, and it was the first time all evening I'd laughed without any effort in it. Somewhere around the main course, my grandmother came across the dining room. She is 81 years old, and she uses a cane. She decorated herself with a strip of floral tape from the dollar store, and she walked through that room like she had somewhere to be, which she did. She pulled out the chair across from us, sat down without ceremony, and looked at Edmund with the straightforward curiosity she has always applied to people she intends to understand. "You're the one who's been keeping my granddaughter company in the corner," she said. "Edmund Kwan," he said, and rose slightly from his chair. "Congratulations on your anniversary. 50 years is remarkable." My grandmother studied him for a moment. Then she looked at me. Then she made the small, satisfied sound she makes when something has confirmed what she already suspected, and settled back in her chair. "Nathan organized a very impressive evening," she said, in the tone she reserves for sentences that carry more than their words. "He put a lot of care into it," I agreed. She looked at me with the particular expression that has meant, for my entire life, that she sees exactly what's happening and we don't need to discuss it directly. Then she took my hand and patted it twice and said, "Your grandfather would like you two to sit with us for the toast. Will you come?" We did. The last hour of the evening was spent at the head table, beside my grandparents in the warmth of whatever it is they've spent 50 years building between them. From across the room, I was aware of Tiffany watching, and I didn't look over to confirm it, because I didn't need to. Monday happened. I wasn't in the meeting, but Edmund told me afterward, in the careful and precise way he describes most things, that it had been thorough. TD Bank's risk team had by that point identified discrepancies across 4 of Nathan's active loan files, projected valuations that didn't reconcile with independent appraisals, construction cost estimates that diverged significantly from supplier documentation, absorption timelines that appeared to have been generated by wishful thinking rather than market analysis. In 2 of the files, the divergence was not the kind that could reasonably be attributed to optimism. The construction financing for the Mississauga project, a $78 million facility that was Nathan's largest to date, was placed on hold pending review findings. By the end of that week, 2 of his smaller lenders had issued notices. His company's line of credit was frozen pending the outcome. By October, Nathan Aldridge Developments had gone quiet. The website first, then the social accounts, then the auto-replies on the office email. My aunt told me, not unkindly, that the Porsche had gone back, that the Etobicoke condo, the one with the rooftop terrace that Tiffany had filmed herself walking through in 30-second increments, had been sold quickly and at a significant loss. I didn't feel triumphant about any of it, exactly. That's not quite the right word. What I felt was something more like the quiet satisfaction of witnessing the natural conclusion of a particular kind of story. My grandmother called me the week she found out the full shape of things. She didn't say much. She asked how I was doing, and I told her well, and she was quiet for a moment. "You know," she said finally, "I've always thought the most useful thing a person can have is a clear sense of their own worth. Not the performed kind, the actual kind. The kind that doesn't need a room full of people to confirm it." A pause. "You've always had that, sweetheart. I don't think you realize how rare it is." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. What I've thought about in the months since, the thing I keep returning to is the particular nature of a contempt that disguises itself as tolerance. Nathan hadn't put me by the coat rack out of cruelty. Exactly. Cruelty implies caring enough to intend harm. He'd done it out of something smaller and sadder. The need to confirm a story he'd told himself about who we were relative to each other. He needed the corner table to exist so that someone was in it and he was not. He needed the microphone moment to land so that the room would laugh and his position in it would be fixed. What he hadn't accounted for, the thing no one who operates that way ever seems to account for, is that the person they've placed in the corner might not be there because they have to be. Might be there because it genuinely doesn't matter to them where they sit. Might have spent enough time knowing their own value that a folding table next to a coat rack in a nice restaurant is just, at the end of the day, a place to sit. And might have brought along, as their guest, for the evening, the person quietly holding the key to everything the room thinks it admires. I'm still teaching grade 4. I still drive the Civic. I still keep the same apartment, with the same East End view, I've looked at for 6 years and not once grown tired of. My students are in the middle of their first chapter books right now, and there is something that happens on the face of a 9-year-old when the words stop being difficult and start being a story. When the page stops being work and becomes a world that no amount of money has ever been able to purchase or replicate or post about with any accuracy. That's the thing Nathan never understood about small ambitions. Some things only look small from a distance. Up close, they're the whole point. The tables turn. They always do. Sometimes they just need a burgundy dress, a quiet man in a charcoal suit, and whatever is on page 12 of a Mississauga project proposal that doesn't quite add up.